Hi, and welcome to our third episode on Who Wants to Be a TV Presenter. And thank you for joining me on this one. All right, on the last class, on the second episode, I talked to you about the must haves of every presenter, the skills that every good presenter must have in order to excel. And we talked about the very first six of them. We talked about communication, we talked about presentation skills, we talked about creativity, we talked about teamwork, talked about leadership, and then we talked about research. If you're just joining me for the first time, you can check out the previous episode just so that you are up to date with what we are discussing on this episode. So on today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about the rest of the must-haves of a TV presenter. Today we're going to be looking at interviewing skills. We're going to be looking at, a presenter has to have a good memory. We're going to be looking at interpersonal skills. And then your literacy is also a factor. And then you need to work more under pressure. You need to know how to work under pressure. All right. The first one is interviewing skills. You need to know your subject. If you are going to be interviewing someone on your show, you need to know your subject. Your subject refers to your guest. Your guest is your subject. You need to know your subject. You need to do your pre-interview homework. Now, that pre-interview homework is what you need to do before sitting down to ask questions, to ask your subject questions. You need to know their credentials, their background. You need to research on their expertise, and then you need to be aware of any controversial discussion topics. What I mean is this: if there's any controversy surrounding your guest, you need to be aware of it. And if you need also need to research and know the background of your guest. You need to do your research properly, know the credentials. You don't want to call their name and then you don't know who they are. You need to get to know them. By the time you have gathered all of this information put together, and the next thing is you prep your subject. By the time they arrive your studio, before you go right on air, you need to prepare them for the interview. You need to discuss with them, get to know them, ask them how their names, are pronounced. You need to know how to pronounce their names correctly. A lot of persons don't take it lightly when you pronounce their names wrongly. So you need to know how those names are pronounced, the correct pronunciations of those names. You need to take that time, with your guest, to know them, to meet them, ask them a couple of questions, and then let them know what you're taking them through in the course of the show. Take out any part that they are not comfortable responding to or talking about, especially for those who have controversial issues surrounding them. It could be marriage issues, it could be career issues, it could be some controversial news that went out there or some scandal. You don't want to bring it up on a show and then your guest walks out on you or even fights you, especially on the live TV. Maybe if it's recorded, you can escape with that. But on a live TV, you need to be ready. You need to be ready, and your guest also needs to be ready. Now, the interview should have the chance to prepare for the questions that you're going to be asking them. And then while you don't usually need to provide a complete list of specific interview questions, give them a general idea or the key points of what they will be asked and the topics that will be covered. You want an element of spontaneity without catching your subject completely off guard. Okay, so you need to prepare them. We're still talking about interviewing skills. The next thing is, by the time you have prepped them and then the show starts, you need to start slow. Have a goal in mind for the kind of information you want to get or you want to glean from this interview, and slowly work your way towards it by asking simple questions. You need to start with the very simple questions about them, depending on what the entire show is about. You need to start with simple questions first. As you start with the simple questions, then you advance to the other questions down on your list. Now, interviews can be emotional sometimes, and then hammering people with that I've got you kind of style, it may not go down well with your guests, and you don't want to make them uncomfortable being on your show. And then asking the tough questions too too soon can also cause the subject to be uncomfortable. Don't ask the tough questions if you have them too soon. Don't ask them too soon, especially if this is the first time that your guest is appearing on TV. Remember that this is an interview, not an interrogation. It is an interview, not an interrogation. So you have to be nice, you have to be smart about how you weave your questions to elicit the right responses from your guests. You want to gain the trust of your subject so that they can trust you and be able to give out as much information as you expect them to give out. Okay? So still on interviewing skills, you have to use active listening. You don't want to ask questions and then just throw your face away or your mind away from what the guest is saying. As you're asking those questions and they are responding, you just might have some follow-up questions to clarify certain things that they must have said. Probably most of the time your follow-up questions are not on your list. So you want to listen carefully to be able to pick up important information that might require some form of clarification. Okay, now finally, on interviewing skills, you need to be able to ask open-ended questions. Ask follow-up questions to gain more information, just like I said, from your subject, but rather than searching for yes or no answers, ask questions that will lead to a story or an emotional share. Let them tell you their stories. You can tell and you can ask your guest to say, take us through your journey about how you built through your career to become the personality that you are today. That is an open-ended question. Let them tell you their story. It could make an interesting listening. And by the time you're listening, you just might pick up one or two follow-up questions that would be in the mind of the viewers that you are working for, actually. Now, for instance, I'll give another instance. You can ask questions and say, how did you feel when you sold an album for the first time? Or you can ask questions and say, when did you realize you wanted to be a doctor? So these are open-ended questions. It's not a yes or a no answer. Open-ended, and let your guests tell their stories. These questions may not be part of your outline, but it's important to react with follow-ups that can expand the story. Talking about follow-up questions, it is important to react with some of these little in-between questions that can help the information you are getting from your guest. And that's it for asking open-ended questions. And everything we've discussed today are all about interviewing skills. Now, on our next class, we will be doing another part yet of the must-haves. There are some that I'm unable to cover today, and then on our next class, we will be touching all of them. I am looking forward to seeing you on the next class. Simply hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and turn on your notification to get prompt updates on whenever I drop new videos. Thank you for joining me on this one. My name is Michael. This is Lapen Media TV. I'll see you on the next one.